Okay, and we are live. We are here recording. Okay, this is Jihad here from Archery for All in the UK, and we are setting off on a new series of Ask an Archer, and we've named this series to benefit from the time we have in the lockdown period. And so today is beginning of May 2020. And what better way to start with our guests, if we can call that, or our teachers rather, than the man himself, Mr. Lukas Novotny from the States. So Lukas, welcome. Thank you for giving us your time and letting us have a chat with you.
You're welcome. Okay,
no problem.
Let's begin.
Okay. So what we've done, we're going to kind of get straight into it. We've put out a number of questions to various WhatsApp groups and people who are been following you, or they've been taught by you, and who are generally in the traditional archery community. And we asked them to send in some questions and get some general advice from you and see what your take is on certain things as well. And then we may just diverge off into a number of other topics, but we'll see how it goes. So I don't think you need too much of an introduction. People can find your information online. They've obviously heard about you as well. But, needless to say, we appreciate you as a person who has sacrificed basically, most of your past 20, 30 years at least into, reviving the tradition of archery, horseback archery and saddle making, arrow making, and really trying to reconnect with the origins of these disciplines and these crafts, which, in our technological age today is, we are always somewhat separated from these things, Traditionally, we would be doing this face-to-face, but here we are electronically, but at least we have that means. But, we do appreciate people like yourselves who have made that sacrifice. And, while you're living and breathing, it's very important for us to be able to benefit from your experience and your knowledge. And so it can further kind of push the levels of the traditional archery community that we have at the moment. Okay, so this is from Imad in the UK. He had a couple of questions, but we'll just choose one of them here. Okay, firstly, how often do you train? Obviously, in a normal situation, if you're not traveling and things like that, if you're at home in Florida, right? You're in Florida.
Yes, yeah. In Florida. Well, one of the reasons I moved down here is so I can train often because of the weather. Right. When I was living up in Ohio, my season basically ended come beginning of November and didn't start until April. Okay, right. Because it's very icy and wet up there. North Carolina, where I lived for about 4 years when I moved further south, was a better place, but nonetheless, we still got snow and the season was, not really on all the time. So moving to Florida was a big benefit to me being able to train. Mm-hmm. And so I tried 4 to 5 times a week if possible. Okay, well, that's a luxury that I have, obviously, because I work on my property. My shop, my bow shop is here, my house is here. All I have to do is look out and see the horses out in the pasture. And so not everybody obviously has that luxury.
Sure. So it's an all-inclusive property that you have. So you don't really have much need to go out except for amenities and shops and things like that, really.
Exactly. I don't really have to leave here at all, even during this time of the COVID. It's like, if I don't go off the property, I don't even know what's going on out there. Okay?
Wow.
I mean,
amazing.
It's like living like a hermit.
Excellent. When did you move down to Florida?
We moved down here in 2010, I believe. It was March that I know for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so nearly 10 years. This year would be 10 years.
Yeah. But I started training, even when I was living in Ohio, it was the same situation. It's just the weather was not exactly necessarily cooperating all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
But I had my horses obviously on the property there as well, and so I was able to train also, you know,
yeah.
as well for this.
Well, of course, if you've only got 6 months of the year, I mean, that drastically cuts down your practice time and training time and your ability to prepare for competitions and things.
Right.
Right. Okay, so each time that you're training, how long would a training session last for?
Well, I would say that, you know, everybody has a limited time. Even though that I live on my own property, I still have responsibility. You know, I still have my normal life to live, obviously, besides bullying, and, you know, I'm married. So it's not like, you know, like some people, they can just kind of, they're married to the sport, okay, and they can develop really their, but that's craziness, because there's more to life, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But anyway, I would start generally, you know, taking the horse out, grooming it. Well, grooming it. I generally, I'm not a good groomer when it comes to horses, because I feel like it's a waste of time. Just basically slap their butt and, you know, let the dust fly off and put the saddle on and go, right? But I would spend at least 10, 15 minutes. The warm-up I would do would be mostly just doing dressage, basically fine-tuning the horse, you know, teaching it to listen properly, to do what I ask it. And then I would maybe take because by that time they would be warmed up. So, you know, the horse is already trained to stay in the course. My course does not have any barriers on both sides, so it's just a track like Kashai has Valley.
Right.
And I would just start practicing. So altogether, it would take about 1 hour, 2 hour and a half at the most, depending. And I would start with the Hungarian course, the slower course, and then I would finish with the faster courses. Okay, as they developed, obviously, initially it was only the Korean, because the first competition, international competition I went to was in Korea in 2005. That's when the first international competition, Sokcho. Okay, and so I trained for that. But as I started to go to travel to Turkey, you know, obviously, I realized there was more to it, the way they had the courses set up, and they discovered their own tradition in horseback archery. I start adding things to it. Now, of course, you go anywhere and you don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes these courses are kind of crazy, not really well designed, but that's another story.
Yeah, I mean, we'll maybe come on to that. It seems like there's every year there's a new course that they come up with to make things more challenging and harder and things like that. But we can come into that in a little bit. A couple of things, just what you mentioned there. So firstly, I want to just maybe talk about. So you would ride the horse. You say roughly an hour.
Yeah.
Again, I think this varies from country.
Like I said, that's just the working out. That doesn't include the prepping up of the horse. So, you know, but you're going to spend about an hour and a half, basically.
About an hour and a half. You know, you know horses better than most. Different horses have different abilities for better cardio and longevity and things like that, and stamina. Someone might say, well, riding a horse for an hour, you're tiring it out. And, you know, especially I think in the UK, from my experience, is that, you know, you go for a lesson or say 20 minutes, half an hour. And even if you're doing quite a bit of cantering or some galloping, the owners seem to be quite wary that, you know, it's really tiring out the horse and they want to give it a rest. Maybe that's because other people are riding it. I don't know.
I have something. I have something to say about it. It's like you training, okay, for a marathon, right? Well, if you're going to try to run marathon by just never running it before, you're not dying, you know, trying to do it. That's obviously impossible. First of all, the animal is built different than you and I. Okay, so to tire the horse, it's not that easy. The horse has to be absolutely out of the shape standing in the stall all day long. So, but if you have some regiment, if you have some discipline, if you do something on regular horses with the horse, on regular basis with the horses, that horse will develop that stamina. My horses, even in this heat, okay, in the summertime, it's really hot here. So I would do it like really late in the evening, for example, before it got dark. And they would develop sweat, but I've never had any health issues. I have never had I would say 30 years I've owned horses. I've never had a horse sick, seriously. Okay. So if you do the conditioning, if you do it on a regular basis, you kind of slowly, gradually let them kind of get into it. 1 hour is no big deal. Kasha used to say that you should train like, let's say the amount of time that I suggested earlier. And he would do basically like 19, 20 gallops. Okay.
Right.
And at that speed, that's really not that big of a deal for a horse. You have to realize that it's, you run, let's say 100, 110, even 150 meters. Even if you run it at a good clip and then you go back, you're walking back, there's a little bit of reflection, a little bit of time for the horse to relax. The horse isn't constantly galloping.
Right.
So it's not as bad as a lot of people think. So I don't know why people have a problem with it. If they condition their horses, this is no big deal.
Yeah, I remember that when you came to the UK last year for the clinic, we were talking and you said that, your horses are not even in stables, which I was quite surprised about, because in the UK, it's a given that horses are kept in the stables and they have to be really pampered and this, that, and the other. But I mean, your horses are just out there, winter, summer. Well, you don't really have winter.
Well, that's the best thing for the horse. Absolutely. That's the best thing for the horse, because the horses that are cooped up in a barn will develop all kinds of problems. I had a barn up north, obviously, because of the weather. In the wintertime, it would get really cold and snow and stuff like that. But even so, the breeds that we have today are a little bit more sensitive to that. They're not the hardy breeds of the old, right?
Right.
And in England, it's a European thing to have stables like that and stable the horse. You don't have to have a huge property to leave the horses out. That's the best thing for them, to freely move instead of cooped up in a 12 by 12. When they start cribbing and they start walking the stall and, doing all kinds of things with their heads, because they just get obviously bored. And a horse wasn't made for the stall. So, from that, you have all kinds of issues. Like I said, because of it, all kinds of weather that the horse would stay out. I've never had any health problems.
Yeah.
The horse is, hardier.
Yeah. Just talk to us briefly about your experience with Kashai in the early days. What time you had spent with him, how you met him, etc. Just kind of a brief.
Well, time I started making bows already. This was back, and I started making bows. Well, I would say even a little before, like 1983, 84. Basically, I was always attracted to archery, obviously. So that bow making would take me further. It became more and more serious. I was not really happy with doing art, especially the modern art. And so I slowly kind of phased out of it and got into the bow business. And I met Kashai the first time in 1988. Oh, what am I talking? Not 88. No, 1998.
98.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, my bow making started as a hobby, and it kind of went on for like almost 10 years before it became actually business. Okay.
Did you have any? Sorry to interrupt. Did you have anyone that you were you self-taught bow maker, or you just kind of knew a couple of bows in your area?
This was before the internet. This was before the internet when I got into it. It was extremely difficult to get any information. The internet didn't come in until like really into, in the 90s, right? And so in the early 80s, it was basically books and a lot of telephone calls with people that you knew, that you met in these archery rendezvous, that you kind of shared the information. And that's how I basically started bow making, and it was trial and error. Today, it's so easy to get information on the internet, right? And learn. I don't know why people don't get advantage of it.
Sometimes too easy, and there's too much information as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I met him in 98 when he was brought in by David Gray from Hungary. He met him by a chance. David was in Austria and saw something about Kasai someplace. It was either he was doing some kind of a demo, and he saw what do you call it? Like a poster of some sort. I'm not quite sure how that went. Or bought a bow in Austria of his. I think that's what it was. And found out that the man lived in Hungary. So he basically rented a car and drove from Vienna to his place in Kapoś Mero. And that's how he met him. And he was very impressed. And so he kind of arranged for him to come over to the States. I think he paid the way for him to come. David lives in Pennsylvania. He's still around. He's in his 80s now. But,
he authored the book on bows and stuff, right? There's a book that he.
Yes. And he used to have the company called Krakow. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yes, yeah, familiar, yeah.
Yeah, he used to sell bows and stuff. So anyway, the Kashai came to his place. The local stables allowed him to train up a couple of horses that they trailered to Michigan. And I was in Michigan already, actually, at the shoot there, selling bows with my then partner, Tony Horvath. And that's how we met. And I was already doing horseback archery, actually, okay? Because since childhood, I loved horses and I loved archery. And my wife, she was an experienced rider. And so we got horses like in 93, I think. We got married 88. We got horses like 92, 93, right around that time. So I started basically just riding in a field and shooting at bales, pretending I'm hunting buffalo. This was done with like the very primitive Indian bows, like self bows, like Comanche, Kiowa style, or the sinew reinforced northern, like Sioux and Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne and stuff. That type of a short, tiny little bow. And I was into hunting and brain tanning and stuff. So I was into that Indian stuff big time.
Excellent.
And so that's how I started. But when I saw Kashai first time doing it, I was quite taken aback because I all of a sudden saw that it had some structure, that it had some rules. And what I saw was beautiful to me. I thought it was kind of like watching poetry in motion. It was really beautiful show he put on. He was shooting 6 arrows at that time. On that 3-sided Hungarian, the classical one that we know.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And, we kind of hit it off and we talked and stuff. And one thing led to another. And we arranged for him to come back in 99 to do the first clinic in Fort Dodge, Iowa.
Okay.
So that's how we met. Yeah.
Excellent. Also, just a brief mention about you're a man of many skills. God has blessed your hands. You have experience in glass blowing. Is that correct? You were doing glass blowing?
Not glass blowing. I was trained as in Czech Republic. Well, it used to be Czechoslovakia back then. I have more of an artistic background.
Right.
Trained as I went to the middle school of sort of art glass. I don't know what you would call it in Železný Brod. Iron Ford, literally translated.
Right.
And there's a school there, middle school. Our schooling in Europe is a little different, right? It was like a vocational school, you might say.
Okay.
That's 4 years after my grammar, 9 years, and you go 4 years into that's with preparation then for possible university, college. And so I studied there engraving, glass engraving. Okay. Very classical art, dating back all the way to Rome, like the cameo, perhaps, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that was my subject that I studied. And from there, I went to Prague University of Applied Arts, studying under Libensky, who was one of the most famous modern glass artists in the world. I mean, he's now gone to his reward, but at the time, he was the premier, considered to be the one of the best.
Yeah.
So that's what I started with. Unfortunately, I never finished my studies. I studied only 2 years because we immigrated.
Have you been able to transfer that skill of that over to your bows?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I was always somewhat accomplished in drawing and painting, and so you could use that skill, obviously, especially in Oriental archery, because a lot of these bows, as you know, were richly decorated. They were highly prized weapons.
Sure.
So that came in really handy, obviously. So it's not just the technical part of making the bow, obviously, which is important because obviously it has to function properly. But then it's an extra bonus if you can really also finish painting it, because in the old days in Turkey, for example, rarely would the bow maker actually finish the bow with decorations. That was done actually by other people. Okay.
Okay, right.
So
other
yes,
yeah. Excellent. Okay, next question. Has making bows helped you in improving your shooting, would you say?
That's a good question, because, you know, we have a saying in America: beware of the man with one gun. What does that mean? Well, that means he's used to that one gun and he's using it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. When you have like, I don't know, 5-6 models to offer, and when you're filling the orders, and I finish the bow and I have to tailor it and I have to take it out and shoot it, and I have to shoot with 3 fingers, then I have to shoot with a thumb. So, and each bow is somewhat different. Longer, shorter bows, you know, they have a different feel. So that creates a problem. And I had invested so much time into horseback archery. Not that I have neglected the ground archery. No, I wouldn't say that. I just, perhaps I didn't spend as much time as I wanted to. So now I'm spending more time actually doing ground archery.
Right.
And focusing on shooting long distances. I shoot up to 90 meters now. Okay.
Oh, excellent. Wow.
And so that helped me to actually become much better for distance, like going to 3D tournaments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So I can't really say it made me appreciate different bows, the cultures from which there came. Okay, because you kind of have to look at the whole picture when you're looking at the bow as such. And it's like today people are too lazy. They don't like investigate, and they don't look at the history of anything, and they start inventing their own ways, like reinventing things where things do not need to be reinvented.
Right.
You know, as we say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that is the problem, not just in bow making or anything else, but also in horseback archery, other sports. If you do not know the foundation from which it grew, this particular sport or the skill, then how can you possibly understand it correctly?
Sure,
so,
definitely.
So the culture behind it, you need to know the purpose, and you know, all that stuff. So
yeah. At what point did you move from finger to thumb, or were you always shooting thumb, or you were interchanging?
Well, okay, so let's put it this way. When I started to go to these shoots, before I actually was really serious about bow making as a occupation, it began as a hobby at first. I was doing it along with the glasswork that I was doing at the time. And I befriended this man, Tony Horvath. Well, that was actually even before him. There used to be a very famous shoot, a longbow invitational up in Michigan, back in the 80s, okay, late 80s and early 90s. It's the heydays of the sort of the resurgent archery after the compounds kind of like all of a sudden took over and the traditional archery almost died out. But it was slowly coming back through the 70s, and especially then through the 80s, and kind of like hit the heydays of it in the late 80s and the early 90s, at least in America. And these shoots were incredible. I mean, you couldn't get through the crowd for the amount of people there. Okay, and it was a great camaraderie. People shared their experiences in hunting and bow making, and you would go to the dealer and take the bow and just go and go ahead and take it and go shoot it. And nobody ever stole anything. It wasn't until like 10-15 years later when they started to ask for driving licenses because people wouldn't bring the bow. It was that good. Okay, and that's when I met Jaap Koppedrijer, and he attempted to build these composite bows like Persian, Turkish, or whatnot. Okay, and I said, I'm from that part of the world, and I'd grown up the fairy tales and the stories I heard, or reading accounts, historical accounts of boyars or the Turks, using these short, powerful weapons made of these materials, and I got really intrigued. Okay. And so that's how I slowly kind of got into it. You know, took a trip to Thailand to get a bunch of horn, a huge crate. And then I befriended this man, Jeff Schmidt, in Wisconsin, who was already well ahead on, or well on his way to be proficient in this type of bow making. He's made several composites, and so befriending him and going over there to see him, and him coming over to my place, and he was really gracious and helped me. And it was he was kind of my mentor, because he was a professor of physics and mathematics, still is, at the University of Wisconsin. Incredibly powerful man, shooting 140 pounds. You know, wow. I mean, he would say that professor would be a pencil neck, right? Especially professor of mathematics. And that's basically how I got into it. And so.
But in the beginning, that was finger draw, and then, or that was thumb.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I almost forgot. I got sidetracked. Sorry about that. So yeah, at first I started just basically 3-finger. Then I explored the tertiary style of release, what the Indians would use, which is kind of a thumb, like kind of pinch grip almost, with the aid of a 2-finger, middle finger, and a ring finger, right? Mm. But the question always was, which side did you shoot on? Was it the right side or the left side? Okay. And then, because I got interested in the composite bow making, that's what got me into thumb draw. Okay. And I dare to say, I didn't know anybody doing thumb draw. Mm. I basically started dabbing in this. I'm pretty sure I was probably the only one back then. I read about a guy in the 50s, a target shooter, who was kind of an anomaly, because he would actually compete in 3D tournaments and target archery, shooting with a thumb. But that's because Dr. Grayson, who had the Grayson collection that's at the University of Columbia, he spoke about him when I met him. And so nobody was shooting with a thumb draw. I tried it. I didn't know how it worked. You know, first of all, you have to sort of kind of like figure out, okay, how to make a properly fitting thumb ring. For a year, I thought I was going to throw it away. I mean, I just couldn't get any result. It was kind of on and off. It would get good, and then it would just not be so good. And it was kind of to and fro. I was going back and forth between 3-finger and thumb. But I stuck it out. And basically,
and we're glad you did.
And then I introduced it in Hungary when I went to his camp, Kashai's camp. And you know Abdul Schrader, right?
Yes, of course.
You know Abdul? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Stupid question. Yeah, I showed it to him because he was shooting with 3 fingers, and he saw me shooting with a thumb. And like, there was the first day when he showed up over there. He came up. He came to me all eager, and it's like, I got to find out how you do this. This is how they did back in the day, right? And I says, yeah, that's how they did back in the day. And so then he started introducing it all over Europe. That's how it kind of took off.
Excellent.
Okay. So I give myself a credit for that, actually.
No, absolutely. Someone has to plant that seed, so we're happy with you. Okay, so we have a slightly technical question here. So someone here from the UK they're asking, how do you spine arrows for horse bows shooting, especially with thumb release? What's your process, and what's involved in terms of, is it poundage? Is it, and also added to that question, do you shoot only wooden shafts, or you do carbon, or is it a mixture of both? And
okay, let's take the first part first, and you remind me of the second side.
Okay.
So first of all, I'm a bow maker, not an arrow maker. Arrow maker is a separate trade. Okay, I do make arrows, but it's a science in its own, and I'm not as proficient in arrow making as I should be. Okay, I know a little bit, but there is difference between shooting with 3 fingers and a thumb. Okay, the techniques are so different that there are there are some differences, or the same rules do not apply in thumb draw as they do in 3-finger shooting. Okay. Generally, I'd say that you follow basically the same rules. Okay. that, let's say, at least the rule of thumb, I'm talking about Western philosophy about bow making, I mean arrow making, before I get to what was done in the East. There they say basically, let's say, if you have a 60-pound bow, that you should have the spine weight, deflection should be, let's say, the 60 to 65 pounds if you're talking 28-inch draw. If you're talking anything shorter than that, you can obviously get away with a lighter spine, maybe 55 to 60, or maybe even 50 to 55, right? However, if you have a longer draw, then you have to add 5 pounds per each inch of the draw that's above 28 inches, okay? So, and then also what determines the spine weight is the weight of your tip, whether broadhead or field tip, okay? The heavier the broadhead or the field tip, okay, then you should go down on the spine, all right, depending on the weight, all right? For example, if you look at some of these arrows made in Kashmir, that's a good example. Those are bamboo shafts, okay, like for example, same kind that you can buy in China now. I have some old ones, and if I put them on a spine tester, they come out about 40, 45 pounds, okay? However, I know the bows they shot were up to, let's say, 100 pounds, okay? Let's just pick a number, 80 to 100 pounds, okay? So you know an arrow like this, even whether shooting 3-finger or thumb draw, the arrow wouldn't perform properly. And they had very low fletching, so, you know, that kind of decreases the stability as well. So, but what they did is they had fairly heavy broadheads. So that kind of evens it out. And I've tested that, and I do say that if that principle applied correctly, it actually does work.
So you're saying,
so if you take an average arrow
with a heavy tip, it can offset a light spine?
Exactly.
Right.
The heavier the tip, the lighter the spine. The lighter the tip, the heavier the spine. Okay. Or at least within the limits that or parameters that I established already earlier.
Okay. Okay.
However, in the East, they didn't have spine testers. They went by the weight of the arrow.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't know. I know who's very good at this is Gorkman. You know Gorkman, don't you?
Yeah. He's currently in Ireland, and I approached him.
He would be the one to talk to about arrows. And he's very knowledgeable. He learned from my friend Michal Sodja in Czech Republic.
Right.
Okay, who's also an excellent arrow maker. His English is a little kind of off, but I would actually trust somebody like that to give you more of a dissertation on the subject of arrows.
I remember Gokman, he showed me a set of war arrows, replicas that he made, and they were very impressive.
Yeah, no, I saw some of the arrows he made one time in Turkey in a competition, and I was very impressed for a bow that I made him, horn bow. Anyway, so why people run into problems in thumb draw shooting with arrow spine is because of their technique, the way they lock the thumb, and well, they do the thumb lock, and then you have to rotate. And a lot of times people put too much pressure with the index finger on the side of the arrow. And so at a full draw, you kind of bow the arrow in, okay? And so when the arrow leaves the bow, it has to work that much harder to straighten it out, to overcome the archer's paradox. And so I think that's where people run into problems. Of course, you've got different types of arrows. You've got parallel shafting, which is the most primitive, the most basic. Then you have the tapered shafts, okay, tapered towards the nock, obviously.
Right.
That means fatter in the front end and smaller diameter in the back at the nock, okay? And then you have the barrel shafted. Now, even in barrel shafting, there are different types. Flight shooting, the weight is offset past the center towards the nock, so for the lift. And for target shooting, it's a little bit more forward, okay? So there's all kinds of rules that, and then of course the weight of the tip, you know, put into that. Barrel barrel shafting arrows is really a true art in itself.
Yeah,
And I'm not that skilled.
Even even in the modern Olympic archers, the top archers, their shafts are even barreled as well. So they understand that science.
Yeah, they either have the tapered or the barrel shafted. They say, according to Klapstek in a Turkish archery, that the type of arrow that flies the best is the one that's kind of shaped like, if I have to exaggerate, like a teardrop. Okay, has the best characteristics when it comes to breaking air, aerodynamics. Okay, so it means the weight is slightly forward, and so it skins out towards it's a little skinnier towards the tip, but more skinny towards the back. For flight shooting, you want to lift, so that's a little different. It's kind of backwards. Although, like I said, I haven't really done much flight shooting. I'm kind of getting ready to do that.
Okay.
And that's a whole science with the arrows there.
Definitely. Okay. So in short, do you normally go for wood or carbon, or you kind of
no. I should. Okay, I just don't have time to make wooden arrows. I either ask Michal Sudja to make me some, or if I do make it, I make it from the scratch. Okay, so it's time consuming, and being as busy as I am, it's tough. So sure. I have to be honest. Rarely do I make wooden arrows. I do though. Problem is getting good wood and properly matched. Okay, in weight, if not in spine weight.
Sure.
And so it's a problem. So for most of my quick shooting in a new bow, or my horseback archery practice, I just use carbons because it's the easiest fix. And for the type of weights that people use for horseback archery, let's say average from 30 to 40 pounds, the 500 to 600 spine deflection is just fine. Okay, 700s, they're a little bit harder to find, but the average 500s, 600s on a deflection scale is plenty good for those types of bows, those types of weights.
Sure. Okay. I mean, yeah, it's a whole science in itself. We could go on for hours with that. Next question: have you ever had target panic, what they call target panic, and you can't really hold the shot for long, and you can't anchor properly? And what advice would you give to someone who suffers from that? How do they overcome that?
Yeah, I used to have a target panic. The target panic stems from one thing, that is that I'll say it this way. You want to succeed, you're afraid of failure, you don't want to be laughed at or have people look down upon you, because you're basically afraid of failure. So you have to overcome that. That's first of all. You have to negate that. You have to get that out of your mind. I know it's easier said than done, but basically that's where it comes from. It's our pride and our ego that gets in the way. Okay. I think anyway, that at least for me, that's what it was. I was always very competitive, so no matter what I did. So for me, the fear of the failure, I think, was the biggest thing. And that's, you go to competition, you want to win. I mean, that's why it's called competition, right?
Sure.
So yes, that's your prime objective, but at the same time, you have to look at it as, kind of no big deal. I got over it. I don't have that anymore so much. Although in horseback archery, I used to have it more than in ground archery. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is. Eventually by doing it more often, you just kind of get over it. The butterflies in your stomach and a target panic. It's mind over matter, basically. You have to be able to be outside of yourself and kind of like looking from the outside in, I always say, you simply notice your mistake, or you simply notice your problems. You don't let it, it's that you have to develop that kind of the Bushido approach to it.
Right.
The calmness of the spirit.
Yeah.
I know it's all easier said than done. There's no really, everybody's different. So there's no really particular advice per se as to how to overcome it. Although there might be people who might have a better idea how to. I basically got over it. From the target panics, you have problems with like technique generally. That it kind of, like you say, people as almost barely come to full draw and they already release. Okay, I call it a blackout before the release. Okay, you anticipate the release so much that you kind of almost black out. Like for a split of a second, you lose consciousness. You're not really following through with the shot. Okay. So this is really important that your focus goes beyond the release itself.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And this is what is really, really important, because it's the same in anything, like even in rifle shooting, because people just jerk the trigger because they want to get it over with. The anticipation of the shot of that release and what comes after is so great that basically you lose the focus.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You need to see beyond that, and you need to follow that arrow into the target, so to speak. You understand?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the only way you can overcome. And the best way to overcome target panic is shooting up close on your own and purposefully holding the bow, from that 1002, 1002 before you release. That's at least for target archery, maybe even 3 seconds. Anything beyond that becomes, I think, a little bit counterproductive. But same in horseback archery. The shots are too rushed, too hurried. There's, that's another story. We'll probably cover that, so I don't think I need to touch upon that right now. But that's probably just focus, mind over matter, and following the arrow into the target is what really matters. There's no blackouts upon the release. I call it a blackout, literally.
Yeah.
Because if I shoot badly, it's because I'm not focused, and I kind of just like shut everything off right at the point of the release. Okay.
Yeah.
Or something before it, and that you cannot do that.
Yeah. It's crazy how sometimes we, like you say, we black out the worst time. That's the time we don't want to black out. We have to be fully conscious and aware and in that moment. But it's as if we're just overtaken, and subconsciously we, like you say, we switch off and we let the shot go, and then we come to, and it's too late.
Yeah, and you switch off at the most critical moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lot of other lessons we can take from there. But like you say, it's a mental attitude. It's a mental state. We need to work on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another question here: have you ever got into like a slump of archery and really been demotivated and felt either you want to give up or you just don't have that fire anymore? And how did you come out of that?
Yes, I did. It comes in anything. It's not just horseback archery or sport. It comes in your life, comes in your prayer life, comes. These kind of things happen in every endeavor, human endeavor you can imagine. It's basically developing a discipline. I quit one time horseback archery. Okay, sold the horses for like a couple of years.
Wow.
Okay, and I got back into it again because I had this slump. I hit the slump, and it was like I wasn't progressing, and I got really frustrated. But those that succeed are the ones that work through this. And no matter what, that you keep on plugging.
That's right. Okay.
Now, of course, in a sport, you're limited with age. Okay, and if you think you're going to be good plugging at 70, well, think again. It just doesn't happen. If
we can be 20% as good as you when we're that age, then we're happy.
So I'm not that good. The competitions I won by the seat of my pants, as I say. There are people that are much better than I am. But anyway, but then as you get older, it's only the experience that you have, that you possess, and luckily you can just teach and pass it on to somebody else. But I just got through it by discipline. No matter how hard it is, you just keep going. You just keep plugging along.
Yeah.
That is, if you completely lose interest, it's another story. But if you think that's your heart is in it, no matter what you do, you're gonna hit those lows. You just have to kind of work through them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like you say, it happens in all different aspects of our lives, and it's the same problem that reoccurs. But there's no real kind of secret pill to it. You just have to you know, pull up your sleeves and work through it, you know?
You're not always motivated to do something, right?
Right.
But you know, if you want to become good at it, you got to practice it, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. You know, you want to be a bodybuilder. Well, you're not going to become one if you're, you know, you want to lose the gut or something, you're going to work out. Well, you're not going to do it by thinking about it and sitting on a couch and eating potato chips.
That's
you know what I
right.
mean? You have to go out and do it.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I want to move swiftly along because I'm sensitive of the time. Let's try and prioritize some of these questions. Let's see here. All right. And again, you know, I wish we had more time with you, but you can kind of keep.
Maybe I'm too long-winded. Maybe I should be a little more brief.
No. I mean, we want you to be long, but again, I'm sensitive of taking too much of your time. I don't want it to go longer than the time I've given.
No. Listen, Jihad, you're just fine. Okay, don't worry about me. You're not. Just go ahead. That's not true what you're saying.
We'll do our best. All right. What is the difference between here it's saying a Mongolian and a Korean bow? What are the pros and cons, and what is the ideal poundage for horsebow for someone that draws a standard recurve at 30 inches? Okay, there's a couple of questions there. Let's just take the first one. What are the key differences between a Mongolian and a Korean bow, would you say?
Well, what Mongolian bow do you mean? From what period? That would be the first thing that you would have to address, and that is you have pre-1600s Mongolian type bow that would be kind of well, I've got some examples on my website. There's a guy in Czech Republic that makes quite a few of those. His name is George Solak, and he's very good at the one he makes. It's called Tengre bows. That he, I know the kid. He's very talented. And so that would be the type of a bow like around the time of Genghis Khan, let's say, that kind of survived until the period of the 1600s, was the conquest of the Manchu. The Manchu basically told Mongols, no, you cannot do archery. Okay, it was outlawed.
Right.
But eventually, it, you know, kind of came back, and they adopted the Manchu bow. So that style of the bow, it's not as big and as heavy as the real Manchu bow, but so that's what you have to establish that. Okay, let's say if we take the post 1644, basically the Ming dynasty was finished. The Manchu, the Qin dynasty came in, okay? And so that particular bow is up to 70 inches long, as opposed to a Korean bow that's 48 inches in total length. So there's a huge difference. There's a movie, War of the Arrows.
Yeah.
If that person, you know, he should watch that movie, okay? Maybe it's the best way. I mean, of course, there are some things in that movie that are just a little hokey, but nonetheless, it's obviously the size of the bow, the type, the arrows that are shot from the Korean bow are much lighter, as opposed to the really heavy, almost spear-like shafts that the Manchu bow shoot. Although they were somewhat limited because of their size, as far as shooting the distance. And on the horse, I hear from Peter Decker, that who's an expert on Manchu archery, obviously, because I don't want to, say nonsense here. And he claims that basically the Mongols on the horse, they would mostly shoot forward. Okay. With that type of bow, it's very difficult. You're limited to shoot to the back. Okay. So the size of it, you're going to be hitting the rump of the horse, most likely, or we'll have some issues with it. So anyway, so that's what I heard from him. So that would be the size. Of course, there's this whole debate of the penetration. Well, if you have a 1500 grain arrow and you're going to hit something with it from, let's say, 50 meters, it's going to have almost a greater impact than an arrow that weighs 400 grains or less. Okay, so if we're talking 600 grain versus 400 grain arrow, well, there's not that much difference to offset the penetration. Okay, but when you're talking 1500 grains, as opposed to 400 grains, when the 1500 grain arrow hits you, it's going to knock you on your butt.
Yeah, just the impact. Yeah,
just the impact of it, because it's a lot of weight, it's a lot of kinetic energy. Okay, you may not notice so much because it's slower from such a bow. Peter Decker got some speeds of like 190 feet per second from a 90-pound bow, which is not bad at all. So we know they shot fairly heavy bows from about 90 to 120 pounds on the average. Let's say you take a well-built, smaller composite of Turkish, Korean type, whatnot, with the lighter arrow, the penetration difference will not be that huge from a short distance, because the speed from the faster bow will somewhat make up for the lack of the weight. Okay, so you have to take these things into consideration. You may have lesser weight, but let's say shoots 30, 40 feet a second faster, you're going to make up for lack of that weight. You understand? Mm-hmm. However, at long distances, the heavy arrows will retain most of its kinetic energy, so it'll still hit hard. Whereas due to drag, the lighter arrow, air drag, and all this stuff will obviously lose it. And, so it wouldn't be as efficient at, let's say 100 yards, 200 yards. It's kind of shot, you know, that where they just shoot at the coming army or whatever from the ground. So that would be the big difference. So it's that, and it's obviously the size of the bow and the profile, the way it's built. The green bow doesn't have these massive tips, which pry bars like leverage, you know, to pull to bend the limbs. So that would be
right. So linked onto that, another question that we have. What are 3 factors that you look in choosing a good bow? If someone wants to buy a bow, for example, a good traditional bow, what would you say are kind of 3 key areas to look at?
If somebody, let's say a customer contacts me, okay, a potential customer, and generally they have questions, okay? Some don't, some just go directly, I want such and such a bow. Some may not be so experienced and they need help. So the first thing I ask them is, what are you going to use the bow for? Okay. Does it matter to you what the bow looks like, the profile, the style? Are you looking for the shooting qualities? Okay, efficiency, speed, you know, performance. Or are the looks important to you? You know, is particular culture important to you? You know, the type of bow. So those are the kind of questions you are asking. Like, what poundage, you know, what draw length, and all this stuff. So you recommend bow based on that. Okay, and the question would be like, what, the recommending for horseback archery or for just general?
Let's say horseback archery. Let's say horseback archery, thumb release, for example.
It doesn't really matter whether you use it from the horse or on the ground. You know, okay. I really don't like the term the horse bow. It shouldn't really exist, that term. Okay, right. Bow is a bow. And as such, can either be used on a horse or not. You know, if it's English longbow, it's going to be kind of hard to. You can shoot it, but you're going to be limited on how many angles you can shoot it from, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, again, it's a preference. You know, do you like a floating anchor? You like to draw far, or do you stick to anchor point someplace close to your face? You know, so. How tall are you? You know, the draw length is obviously important. It's difficult to recommend because it depends on many factors. Generally, from my own perspective, I don't like really long bows on a horse. I find them to be okay. Now that's not how the Hungarians look at it. You know, I've had them, you know, attack me in a roundabout way for making short bows for horseback archery. That you shouldn't do that. That's not how it is. You know, their philosophy is that the bow should be a certain size to achieve or to be proficient at the technique that they teach. It's this 3-finger, you know, floating anchor here. However, what that eventually develops is all kinds of problems, which I had to suffer from because I learned that style, although I was using a thumb draw, and I paid for it dearly because it took me years to get over it. And I see it in them. I see it in a lot of these archers from over there, how that technique actually makes them develop bad habits. But, so floating anchor is a little bit, it's difficult to really anchor on a horse as such when you're riding, but at least to be in some proximity to the same point of someplace, you know, where you can, because if you start switching back and forth, floating the anchor, going down, inch shorter, inch farther, you're going to get different results. It's going to affect your shooting. So the consistency in shooting is, consistency means accuracy, right? If you do the same thing over the same way. So the biggest danger in horseback archery is really this, that because of the speed of the horse, the way the targets are set up, target panic, nervousness, there's no consistency in horseback archery. To develop consistency in horseback archery is very difficult.
Yeah.
To be, you know, that's why it's so difficult as a sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like these long draws and floating anchors. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
It might work for somebody else. I like to emulate Turkish archery. I think they achieved the highest degree of skill in that. And I'm sorry to say, but not everything is based on speed of knocking,
Mm-hmm.
which seems to me to be the biggest obsession nowadays in horseback.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I like to anchor someplace around my face.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like a really long draw. It kind of reminds me to know what's going on here. So I'm kind of more conscious of my anchor point.
Of course, yeah.
So the shorter bows for me are better. I shoot, I now have, you saw me last year, I had that little 42-inch bow.
That was amazing. It was so short. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, 42 inches. I mean, I don't use it for target shooting, but I love Turkish bows. So if I do any kind of target shooting, just ground archery, I use either my horn bows that I have a couple right now, although they always end up, they're for customer, but when I'm tillering them and shooting it, they're mine.
Yeah.
So I use Turkish bows, okay, almost exclusively. Once in a while I use a Tartar bow.
Right.
But I find the Turkish bows to be the most efficient. Those are the ones I like the best. That's excellent. You know, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, well, that helps answer a question that was coming up later. So that's good. If we move on to a kind of a quicker question, someone's asking, is, you know, normally, especially in modern archery, a beginner comes along and they do like the eye dominance test, and that will override whether they are a left or right-handed archer. So do you think for traditional archery, let's say, is it eye dominance or hand dominance that is more telling as to how they should shoot, which hand they shoot with?
Neither. How would you answer that question if you were living back in a day when archery, let's say in the Middle East, throughout the Ottoman Empire or earlier, was, first of all, it's obviously a very important sport in Islam. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it was a primary weapon, almost, well, not primary, but a very important weapon, in some cases almost primarily. And they had to be ambidextrous. How would you then address the issue of eye dominance?
Right.
Or, you know, or whether you're right-handed or left-handed. You know, so they had to be able to shoot proficiently both left-handed and right-handed. And we know that for a fact from the accounts of, you know, eyewitnesses from the old days in Istanbul, right? The Italian ambassadors from Venice watched the archery exhibition, and they were clearly describing, you know, that they would switch back and forth. Or even in training manuals that we have that Hilmi dug up someplace in the library in Turkey, we have a description of how they practiced. We know exactly how they practiced, and it involved shooting both left-handed or right-handed and left-handed.
Right.
So the eye dominance is obviously unimportant. I say I'm left eye dominant and I shoot right-handed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so does it give me problems? No.
Yeah.
Your body adjusts, your brain adjusts. Okay. So I find it to be a little annoying and somewhat of a nonsense when people insist that if you're right-handed and left eye dominant, you have to switch to shooting left. Mm-hmm. You understand?
We're kind of limiting the person's capability if we're saying you have to shoot, you know, on only one side and you totally ignore the other side. It's not balanced, right? We're not balanced.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, I'm guilty of that. I started shooting left-handed a little bit, and I have to admit that I've not been as as consistent as I should be, because I never deemed myself to be good enough right-handed shooting to actually start learning. But that's a deception, because obviously you have to kind of try it. So I try to target shoot left-handed, right-handed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because you ought to be able to. And if you were a warrior back in the day, what if you had a situation where you couldn't make a shot on your right side?
Weaker side or whatever. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you have a limited angle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only chance you would have is to switch to the left-hand shooting, right? So yeah, it was extremely important. I mean, this is the way they fought when they attacked, for example, troops, that were in columns standing in front. It was like the whirlwind that they did. Okay, so one column went to the left, one went to the right, and so obviously they had to shoot left-handed and right-handed, right?
Yeah, 100%. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm sure they were not divided by the lefties and the righties. So the lefties go over on this side, the righties. But we know for a fact that they were ambidextrous. So that kind of blows the idea of the, whether you're right-handed, left-handed, or left eye dominant, right eye dominant out of the window. So
sure, definitely. Okay. You mentioned before that you're starting to shoot 90 meters, which is very impressive. So someone's actually asking, between 20 meters and 90 meters, what are you changing in your setup in terms of not just your aiming, but are you using a different poundage bow? Are you changing arrows? What kind of setup are you using? Or can someone use the same equipment for 20 meters up to 90 meters?
Okay, good question. Well, first of all, if you're shooting that far, you need a bow that's a little bit more powerful than what most people use for horseback archery. I'm not saying you can't shoot a 30-pound bow at 90 meters, but you can have a hard time because of the trajectory.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to see the target for having to raise your hand so high to lob the arrow that far. So that's going to really be problematic in your shooting. I mean, in your ability to see the target and aim. Okay. So you're going to be limited on the distance with the lighter bows, especially those for horseback archery. So let's say you'll be fine with a lighter bow, let's say 30 to 40 pounds up to 50 meters. Okay. That should not be that much of a problem. I personally like to shoot heavier bows. Okay. My bows are anywhere from 50 to 90 pounds. On the average, I shoot around 70. Okay. I have a 90-pounder here that I shoot. If I shoot 90 meters, and also is the bow good? Was it well designed? Was it well built? So those are all these factors that come in, because that will affect the efficiency and the performance of the bow. So if the bow is well made, especially let's talk horn bows, then I can shoot 90 meters with the 70-pound bow, and let's say slightly below 400 grain arrow or right around there, without raising a hand too high up. Obstructing the view of my target is not that big of an issue. So the flatter the trajectory, the better off you are. Okay. However, if the trajectory is not so flat at longer distances because of the poundage of the bow, then obviously you do have to have some adjustments in elevation the farther you shoot, and that could be problematic. So in this case, you either have to get into like really light carbon bows. Even the Olympic archers, okay, they shoot, the men, let's say, shoot out average 40 to 50 pounds, okay, because they shoot up to 75 meters.
Right.
And those bows are not really great performance. I shot a couple of them, and in fact, I don't know what they find so fantastic about that. The limbs go like this. It just doesn't feel right. And all these, never mind the stabilizers, but they use their light carbon arrows.
Yeah.
With tiny little fletching, almost like flight arrows. Okay?
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, you're talking, look, they shot these distances back in a day. With heavy bows. I mean, Korea, okay, fine. It's a light arrow, the bandwidth, they shoot 145 meters.
Wow.
And you can see about the angle of it, which is
Sure.
not too bad. But if they shoot those horn bows, I know for a fact they're not 40-pounders.
Yeah.
They are a little heavier. They're between 50 to 65 pounds, those horn bows. Okay. Shoot.
But I mean, I remember seeing some of those when they're shooting their 145 meters, their limbs are literally like fully bent back and they flatten out. They're really pulling that bow to its maximum.
Yeah, they have a floating anchor and it's like 30-inch draw, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right. We're nearly at the end. One more question, and then we're gonna have just finish off with some kind of fun. Well, some one answer questions, some quick fire questions, and we'll wrap it up. Okay, someone sent in a bit of a cheeky question here, so I'm gonna pose it to you, and we'll see. It said, if you had to shoot a bow that is not made by you, which bowyer would you choose?
I read that question. Yeah, that's, let's see. I've shot some good bows by other people. Let's see, I'm trying to think. You know, it's funny because,
and we're not trying to catch you out or anything like that.
No. I'm just trying to think. There's a guy
on the questions.
When I was in Ukraine 2 years ago. What's his name? There's a bow maker there. Very talented young man. And some of his bows that I shot were really good. Very impressive. Excellent craftsmanship.
Slovakia, is it not Vey? Vey?
Oh, he's Ukrainian.
Oh, Ukrainian, sorry. Okay, all right. That's elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and it's funny. The one in Slovakia, I think he's Hungarian originally or something.
Ah, okay.
And, yeah, they came up to me and they tell me, look, I designed this bow, and I looked at it. It was my Turkish fiberglass bow. And I said, well, I mean, you know, this is so frustrating because people go around and say, oh, look, I invented this. Well, what you see today in a modern laminate bow today, composite bow, it's myself and Tony Horvat who came up with the whole glue-up system, the whole tiller system. What you see today was invented by us back then. And so everybody basically copied that. And that needs to be set straight because there are people coming out saying inventing this and that. And it's not true. I mean, there was none of that. We basically, Fred Baer made the last static tip recurves back in the 40s, okay? And from that time on, nobody did any static tips, only in Korea, obviously, because the tradition was unbroken, and in Mongolia.
Right.
All right. That was it. In the West, there was nobody making static tips. We came back with it because based on the knowledge of making the horn bows, I mean, introduced that technology into the modern composites. Okay, so when I came to China, I knew that when I sold my first bow in China, they were going to copy it. Of course, the Chinese modern archery is based on the bows I sold there.
Right.
They're basically copies of my bows.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of them that I shot were really good, obviously good copies. Because they would come to the table, start taking measurements and pictures, and then when I sold the bow, I knew, oh yeah, this is it. So,
okay, let me. What if I put to you? I mean, I'm sure you're close friends with Adam Karpowitz. What do you think? I mean, his bows, they're not for sale per se, but
with him. He's an acquaintance to me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've had some. I've been in touch with him a few times, but I never met the guy actually.
Okay, all right. My apologies. All right, I got that wrong.
I don't know. It's okay, and he's extremely knowledgeable in what he does, especially in traditional finishes. Because I think he's a restorer of some sort. He's got some kind of big background. That's why he knows a lot about the lacquers and these techniques and stuff. He's very knowledgeable in that, and he's a very good, excellent bow maker. I mean, I've seen only a couple of his bows. I never really. One time I shot one of his bows, but I haven't seen anything of his lately. I know last year at the Patih Kupasi, I think he won the long distance shot.
Right.
Okay.
But his bows are purely for research purposes. He doesn't sell them, right? I believe.
Yeah, he does sell them, but because he doesn't have to rely on these bows for a living, he sells them That's my only bone to pick with him. That he would sell them for like peanuts, basically.
Wow,
which
really?
undermines those guys that are trying to,
Yep.
he doesn't need the money, so he would sell one for like $900. Painted
Wow.
bow that would take me
Wow.
so long. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
So that's not really fair towards the bow makers that are trying to make a living.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the unfairness of these markets. When you have a cheap labor like in China, so they can make it for the third of the cost.
Yeah.
So obviously, what can I do?
Yeah. Sure.
The only thing I can do is forward. So anyway, I never really answered the. So
No,
I would. One time I shot, and when it comes to hornbow, one Chinese guy, he made it was excellent Chinese hornbows, the Qin dynasty, the Manchu style bow. Was very impressed with that. Who else? Some of the knockoffs of my bows that the Chinese made. Somewhat their own flavor to it. They were good bows.
There's a lot of stuff coming out of Turkey now in the last couple of years. A lot of these bow makers coming out from there and things like that. Have you come across any of those pieces or?
Well, some of them, because they're like new bow makers, or they don't really understand the principle. They haven't really learned enough to know how to make the bow steady, stable, and stuff like that. It's a problem with some of them being too finicky and stuff.
Yeah.
They look impressive. They don't understand that you cannot necessarily copy a horn bow in modern composites. It just doesn't work properly. Okay? Yeah. You run into all kinds of problems. So you have to treat the material that you're using based or according to its own limits and possibilities. Understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of these people basically ignore.
Sure. Okay. All right. We're going to wrap this up. We've got a couple of quick questions here, and they should just be kind of like one answer questions, and we'll try and wrap that up. So, laminate or composite bow, which one would you choose?
Well,
you don't need to explain why, just whichever one.
Yeah, I love to shoot horn bows, but I don't necessarily have, let's say for horseback archery, I wouldn't have like a light one, light enough, sitting around. I really can't shoot. The heaviest I shot from the horse was like 80-pounder, and it becomes problematic. That kind of blows this whole craziness about speed shooting out of the water. Okay,
right.
These people are trying to impress you how many arrows they can shoot in so many seconds with a 30-pound bow. I'm not really impressed. And besides, you start watching them, the technique is kind of like, okay, the elbows down, they start drifting, short draw, and it's kind of falls apart. If you really have to focus on your archery and shoot an 80-pound bow from a galloping horse, it's totally different problem. It's a totally different feel. It's completely. We should have probably one competition where we do like penetration tests. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like shooting the breastplate.
Right. Like that. Right. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Anyways, yeah. So. Where were we again? I forget.
So, okay, laminate or composite bow?
So the laminate was always the easiest one to grab for me. Okay, right. For the everyday use that I would be using was like a laminate bow. Modern composite meaning, fiberglass, carbon / wood, combination.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just because the horn bows are so much harder to make, they're slower to make. I am so backed up on them that as soon as I make one and it's tillered, I gotta quickly finish it so I can get it to the customer, because the customer has been waiting for like 2 years or 2.5 years.
Wow.
So I don't really have, like my own actually horn bow.
Right. Wow. Okay. All right. What is your favorite track to shoot on?
Turkish
track. Just
like
explain for those who they're not familiar with what's involved in the Turkish track. What is it?
60-centimeter targets set at 5 feet, the center of the target above the ground, basically like a height of a man. I like the setups they have. I kind of added to it. I went based on what Hilmi found, the paintings or the drawings in the archives. That's how I set up my track. I kind of gave up on the Hungarian. I'm kind of sick of it already. that slow lope and all this like plucking. It's like plucking guitar. You know?
Right.
I don't know. It's to me, it's not like. To me, it's not. I know a lot of people will get really offended by me.
That's fine.
To me, it's not horseback archery.
Sure.
I over the years, I just came to that conclusion.
Mm.
That's not how they practice it. It's not how they. That's how it was.
Yeah. It's mainly being kind of developed for the sports side of it. But anyway,
I'm not denying the skill. I'm not denying the skill.
Of course, sure.
That are amazing at this, okay? But it's just, I look at it. I'm a kind of if I look at something, I want to do it like it should be done or has been done for centuries. Something that, you know.
The way it was done properly,
It's a modern invention. It's cut off from the tradition. It didn't really grow out of it. You understand? It's kind of take on.
Sure. Okay. Wooden or carbon arrows? I know we've kind of
for your everyday practice. I recommend carbon because if you're gonna do wood, you're gonna be really like traditional. Most likely, you're not gonna shoot a horn bow or a wooden bow. So why bother shooting wooden arrows? I never got that even in competitions like in Turkey. You have a fiberglass carbon bow and you have to shoot wooden arrows. Why?
Right. Doesn't mix.
You have an all natural bow category. Fine. Okay, then have a horn bow or wooden bow. Then shoot wooden arrows. Okay. But if you're gonna shoot these traditional bows but made of modern materials, why bother? You're going to spend a lot of money on buying shafts all the time because they're going to break more often than not.
Right.
And so carbons are luckily most everywhere you can actually use them for competition. But that shaft, you're going to buy a dozen shafts, you're going to lose it. If you're not going to lose them in the grass, it's going to last you a long time.
Yeah. Okay, we've already answered this one. I was going to say Turkish or Hungarian bow, but you mentioned Turkish bow, so that's been done.
I love Turkish bows. I basically for so many years I've been making all kinds. I've made just about every kind of composite bow there is, and hands down, the Turkish bow. I came to the conclusion that the Turks really had it down.
Wow, that's amazing. That I think that speaks volumes coming from someone like yourself with the experience that you have, knowing what you know about bows and the efficiency of bows and things like that. To have really come to that conclusion is quite telling.
But Jay, how it is. I mean, somebody's gonna disagree with me on that.
Of course.
Because they've been shooting, let's say, Manchu bow for last 10 years, and they're gonna say, "Oh, it's the best bow." So, whatever I say, whatever floats your boat. This is just my personal.
Each to his own. Okay. If you could live in a certain era of archery, what era would that be?
Well, that's kind of nor here or there. God lives outside of time. We live in time. I can't go back in the past and the reincarnation. So, since I live in now, I can only say, well, I like the style that they did back then, and this is what I emulate, so it's Turkish archery. Okay. But since I can't go back, no, I like my flushing toilets and running showers.
Okay. And the very last question, I think, is kind of linked to that one, but which period of history, I know you're a historian, you're a man of the arts as well, which period of history fascinates you most? Not necessarily to do with archery, but just generally.
Tough question. There are many periods in the history that fascinate me. Obviously, the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire at its height, like the Suleiman the Magnificent, ancient Rome. I'm really fascinated with Rome. What they've done is amazing, basically. Laid the foundation for the modern Europe, really, basically. But also the achievements of some of the Islamic cultures cannot be obviously neglected. Some stuff about like northern India, the Mughal period, for example. Okay, that's another one. By the way, I'm down to 7% on my battery.
Okay, that's probably a good sign because we are on. That was the last question. We were going to kind of wrap that up, so I think that's a good interval for us. So, Lukas, what can I say? I had a lot of other questions, and we didn't want to take too much of your time. It's precious. You have a lot of stuff on. again,
no, it's not that. I could talk for another hour, but my problem is my battery and my charger's in the other room. So
no problem, no problem. Perhaps we could do a part 2 at some point. Then that would be
sure, yeah, that's
an
fine.
idea. Excellent, excellent. So anyway, Lukas, we're hoping that we get out this COVID period. We're hoping we're planning on having you in the UK in July. We have had a great response to that, so we hope that can still proceed as normal, as long as you're.
By the way, we'll have to keep in touch about that because everything is closed, even the embassy in London. Okay, so hopefully they're going to open it up. But you better start preparing that you may have to move the dates, maybe. You know, I don't know if it's going to open that quickly. So
no problem. We'll stay in touch with that. That's not a problem. But we can figure that out. But under any circumstances, we still want to have you here at some point during the year. But Lukas, thank you very much. We appreciate you. Thank you to Patricia, your better half. I know she does a lot of the hard work in the background. We wish you guys all the best to stay safe, and we will be in touch, and we'll speak to you soon.
All right, very good. You take care. Nice talking to you, John.
Thank you, Lukas. Take care. All the best. Goodbye.